right. So, as I believe we're on week 9 of the NFL season has passed us by, we're getting into kind of the midseason mark. Some teams that are at 8 games, some teams are at 9, but either way, we're about halfway through the 17-game schedule. Some trends are starting to emerge. And so, like we talked about in the intro, I believe NFL Total Access picked their players for awards like MVP, Offensive Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Defensive Rookie of the Year. So we're just going to go through all of those, give our picks, see how they compare to NFL Total Access, see where we agree, see where they disagree, see if they're any good. So, Simon, I don't know where you want to start. Do you want to start with MVP or leave that for the end? What are you thinking?
I'm not too sure actually, because there's a lot of different ways we can do this. We could start at the bottom. We could go rookies. Start with that, because just to be clear, we're going to be going through MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive. What did I just say? Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year. So we're going to be going through all of that. But yeah, What do you think? What do you think's the more interesting place to start?
Let's leave MVP for the end. Keep the people.
Sure.
Give the people a reason to keep watching.
Okay. We'll start with rookies then. What do you think's more fun, defensive or offensive? I can give you your
I think defense.
if you want to start with defense.
Yeah, we could. Okay, we can start with defense then.
Okay.
Should I give my pick if it isn't already incredibly obvious?
Well, I can tell you that I agree with you on your pick. So sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So defensive rookie of the year is Devin Witherspoon, and I don't think I think it's close-ish because I've seen people go back and forth between Devin Witherspoon and Jalen Carter. I think Devin Witherspoon is going to get it in the end. I think he has the advantage of playing cornerback, which is a lot more of a featured position. Like Jalen Carter getting a sack isn't going to get as much play as Devin Witherspoon's pick 6 against the Giants, but I do think it's well deserved, and I think there's a couple reasons why. It was again like it's very interesting that it is these two players because these are the two players that obviously Seattle was thinking about taking, because Jalen Carter was who many people projected they'd take, especially given how much they're suffering against the run.
Thought they would take.
Yeah, and so Devin Witherspoon pick kind of came out of nowhere, but it really I think it was the right pick for this team. I think it does a couple things.
Well, in hindsight, I think it's really clear that it
in hindsight, I think if they took Jalen Carter, they would still be fine. But I think it adds a lot to their team. I think the first thing that it adds is just like the way he plays, the style of play that Devin Witherspoon has is just electric, and I think it elevates everybody on that defense. You cannot go a single game without watching, aside from maybe this last Ravens game that we don't even fucking talk about, without him doing some sort of play or some sort of something that just jumps off the screen. And most people are going to point to the Giants game because that's what he had, the pick 6 that was on primetime. Everybody saw it, but every game that he started, he has just looked like the best player on the field. He's looked better than anybody else out there. He's made a guy like Tariq Woolen seem like cornerback number 2, and Tariq Woolen probably should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, in my humble opinion. So just to see that, him making impact plays every single game, doing it so consistently, whether it be a big hit or an interception or anything like that, or just locking somebody up, I think he has all of those elements that make a Defensive Rookie of the Year. And he's doing it against good competition, too. I don't know if there was the stat that went around that when he was on Jamar Chase in the game against the Bengals, I believe he had 1 catch for 3 yards whenever Devin Witherspoon was covering him. So he's shown it against great competition. I think he's brought the level of play of the Seattle defense from somebody who's watched the Seattle defense for the last, I don't know, 11, 12 years.
We've had some bad
playing
defense
with this,
in the last couple of years as well.
Yeah, which people associate Seattle with a good defense, but it really hasn't been that way. There's been some historically bad defense played in Seattle the last
been that
4 or 5 years at least.
Yeah, I was going to say 5 years.
Yeah, as I think the last, as soon as the Legion of Boom died, I don't think we've had nearly as good of a, obviously, but even anything close to that level. And it's starting to feel like that again. And I think it's not just because of Devin Witherspoon. Obviously, they have a lot of key players, but I think the energy that Devin Witherspoon brings is so similar to that of like a
Yeah.
young Richard Sherman, minus a little bit of the trash talking. Doesn't quite have the same trash talk
True.
ability that Richard Sherman did, but
But
the
that's hard.
energy is there.
That's
Yeah,
like goat level.
that's a
and
bar.
and you say that you don't think that it's solely been on Witherspoon, and I agree with you. Obviously, it's not solely on him. There are 11 defensive players on the field at all times, but I think I think you can give a lot to him as being that final piece that really like stuck it in for this defense, because it felt like it's felt like we've needed like a good second corner for that last 5 years. Because even when we
Yeah,
had Shaquille Griffin, it felt like we had nobody to slide next to him, and then we have Tyreek Woolen, and then all of a sudden, and sure, like Kobe Bryant was fine, Mike Jackson was fine, all of
yeah, but
those
he's
guys were
playing. Mike
fine.
Mike Jackson was not fine.
But you know what I
Mike
mean.
Jackson was a
I'm saying,
liability. That was
I'm
rough.
saying fine. I'm just all I'm saying is decent, right? All we've had on that other side of the field has been a decent corner, and then we get Witherspoon, and all of a sudden it's like it just clicks. And I think a lot of that can be just attributed to now finally we actually have a balanced defense. We're not just like our strengths aren't just like stacked at the top with no depth. We finally have a lot of depth at that corner position. We're locking down those top
Yeah.
corners, and we're actually able to defend against a lot of the best teams in the NFL, except the Ravens. And
Yeah, and I do want to bring up that Ravens game because I think that's a good point. For Devin Witherspoon specifically, like he still played well in that game. You want to know why the Ravens beat us? It's because we got bullied in the trenches. That's how teams
yeah,
beat us because they know they can't throw the ball on us. The Ravens just ran the ball the entire day, and we couldn't do anything about it. That's what, as bad as that Ravens game was. And trust me, I still cry myself to sleep thinking about it, even though it's been a couple days
yeah.
removed.
I have a Ravens
Um,
fan in
it,
my uni
oh,
classes. Cade, this is a shout
just
out to
that
you. He
I
was
feel.
very humble about it, and by humble I mean not fucking humble at all.
Oh, fuck that. The Ravens are a very good team, and I'm gonna be doing some more Ravens praise later in this episode. But like, it still hurts.
Yeah,
But yeah, like that's what teams have to do against us, and I think the rate, like I kind of knew we. This is why I'm not that upset about it because I knew we were gonna lose because this is what the Ravens do well, and that's how you beat our defense. Is by running the ball on us and just overpowering our defensive line. Because if you
yeah.
can do that, then there's nothing. Because guys like Devin Witherspoon have locked down the receivers, and
And
I
the thing
think we
about
do a
Witherspoon
good job of stopping the passing game.
that's so cool as well is he's not only just a lockdown corner. He's so physical and athletic as well that he's
Yeah,
so fun to watch. Like I mean, you even go back to the game against the Giants where he had 2 sacks. Like it's
yeah,
just nuts. He's one of those players who can really be good anywhere on the field and not any position, but you know what I mean, anywhere on the field where
yeah.
he's just fun. And I think that's going to be a big
That's a
reason that I agree with you. I think he'll win Defensive Rookie of the Year at the end of the season over Carter because of the fact that he is stuck on an island out there on the far side of the field, and he is doing an excellent job at it versus Jalen Carter, who's not to attribute his success to how good that Eagles defensive line already is, but obviously it takes away a little bit how much help Jalen Carter's getting right off of the bat
yeah.
because he pretty much got dropped into a perfect situation on that defensive line. So I
Yeah.
think I agree with you. I think Devin Witherspoon definitely deserves it. We can move on though
hmm
because we can move on to Offensive Rookie of the Year, which I at the very
This
least don't
one,
think is
this
a
one
hard
will be
pick.
short.
Yeah,
Although who did NFL Total Access have as defensive
they had
rookie of the year?
Witherspoon.
Did they have Witherspoon?
Yeah, they
Okay,
had
good.
Witherspoon. So and I mean it's I you said that it's close-ish. I don't think so. I actually would argue that saying Jalen
I
Carter
think
deserves
it's
it more would be probably fairly controversial at this point. But I
I
think
think I think it's close-ish. Just like I've seen people pick Jalen Carter, and I disagree. I think it will get farther apart as the season goes on because I think in this conversation, the fact that Devin Witherspoon missed the first game kind of gave Jalen Carter a bit of a head start. But I think the gap's going to widen a little bit. But I think as of
yeah,
now, it's close-ish.
yeah, and I mean it's the same thing as anything else. Where two different positions, how do you even compare it? But
Yeah, that's
like
kind of why these awards are stupid.
yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I mean when I just look at with these types of awards. I look at where both teams would be without the player. And that's not
Yeah.
always fair, especially when you're looking at a player who's on a defensive line, where that's a part of the game where if you are the only good player on a bad defensive line, you're not really going to show off as
Aaron
well
Donald.
unless you're Aaron Donald. Yeah, unless you're Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is the one like exception to that, maybe
Yeah.
JJ Watt.
Aaron Donald is
But
the exception to a lot of things.
that's true. But it's a lot harder, I think, to I think the Seahawks would be in a bad fucking spot without Witherspoon. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Like
I
we
would
would be a
agree.
much worse team defensively.
Think about how this defense looked last year.
Yeah, I mean, and Tariq Woolen is great. He's a great corner in his own right. But Witherspoon has, like you said, he's
I
made
think
him
it's
at points look like the second corner.
he's been completely overshadowed this year, which I kind of don't love because he needs to get his respect anyways. But it just
Yeah,
is a testament to how good Witherspoon has been.
they're both incredible at their positions,
They are.
respectfully.
Yeah.
Like, but we should move on. C.J. Stroud. We can just talk about that for a minute because obviously it's not a controversial pick. It's not very close. Like,
Well, I think he locked it up this past week.
Yeah.
So I didn't watch that a lot of that Texans Bucks game because I was busy like poking my eyes out with the kitchen forks and watching the Seahawks Ravens game because that was going on at the same time. But as soon as that torture fest ended, I turned on Red Zone to watch the end of Vikings and Falcons as well as Texans Bucks. Shout out Josh Dobbs, by the way.
Yeah.
But CJ Stroud, just like looking at the situation they had at the end of that game, it's 40 seconds to go score a touchdown. Like that is Patrick Mahomes level shit to just
Yeah.
take the ball from the own 25 and lead this amazing drive with two like all pro level throws, both to Tank Dell, one on the corner route to the left sideline, and then the other for the touchdown up the middle. Those are Pro Bowl, all pro level throws. Like you do not see that from a rookie quarterback. I don't even think there's anybody really in the conversation for this other than
No.
CJ Stroud.
Well, and
it has to be him, and it's because of drives like that, because he's been doing that really all season.
And to give you who some people have as the second guy, just to show you the gap, is Puka Nacua, who, as a Puka Nacua fantasy owner, it's not close.
Yeah, and like Puka Nacua had a better start to the year.
Oh, yeah. But ever since
but
Cooper
because-
Kupp has come back, he's kind of fallen off the
It's not like
stagecoach.
and it's not even to say that Puka Nacua is like a fluke or anything, because I still
No.
think he's a good player, even alongside Cooper Kupp. I think he's proven that with the consistency that he's had in the last few weeks. But obviously, when you're a quarterback, you're going to be considered more valuable. But I also think CJ Stroud is just playing better.
CJ Stroud is almost having
also
not
has
almost.
less help.
Yeah, he's having a historical rookie season as well. Like he's
Yeah,
been quite
most passing
insane.
yards for a rookie quarterback in NFL history last week.
Yeah, like it's pretty much just incredible how good of a season.
CJ Stroud has thrown for more yards in a game already in his career than Russell Wilson has, which is insane to me.
That is insane. But anyway, excuse me. We can move on to I believe defensive player of the year is where we probably want to move on. Okay.
Yep.
So who's your pick?
I think this one is the toughest. I think there's
Yeah.
a couple players you could go to. Let me pull up the. I had a list of the odds, and I was going through. So I think they have the favored right now is Micah Parsons, which like fair.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
Yeah, and then Myles Garrett. But I think I'm not going to pick either of those guys. My pick is T.J. Watt.
Okay.
And now this is a little bit of a like, even though he's like third favorite, it feels like a little bit of a chalky pick because he wins like I don't know how many times he's won, but he has to have won at least a few times. But there's good reason for that. There is no other player. Like I think you could even consider T.J. Watt for MVP with how good this Steelers team has done compared to what their overall performance is, especially on offense. They are in the playoffs right now, and that is mostly because of a guy like T.J. Watt. He has a.
And just to jump in and quickly add into what you're saying, C.J. Stroud already has more career touchdowns than Pickett. Like just to show, and they're still in the playoffs. Not to
Yeah,
not I'm not saying anything about Stroud. I'm saying something about Pickett.
yeah. And because that offense has just been brutal, and it's not like it has been a lot of Pickett, but it's also been their play calling. They don't have a
True.
lot of playmakers there. It's been their offensive line. It's all of that. And so they just have not had a functional offense. They go off in the fourth quarter sometimes, but otherwise they don't have a functional offense. And it's been TJ Watt making like just these plays that will win a game for the Steelers on defense. Like, I don't think I've ever really seen a player other than like Aaron Donald, sometimes Myles Garrett, just take over a game on the defensive side. Like, TJ Watt wins games for the Steelers on defense, which is absolutely insane to say. And I think he's a large, just because of how the Steelers are performing above expectations, and it is their whole defense. They obviously have lots of other guys on there like Minka Fitzpatrick. I don't know if Cameron Hayward's still there, but obviously it's still a great defense, but it's TJ Watt who makes that whole machine move. And I think they probably have a couple less wins and are out of the playoffs if it's not for him. So I think guys like Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett are playing really well. I think in terms of like, if you're looking at MVP on the defensive side of the ball, I think it has to go to TJ Watt with how much he's impacting the games for the Steelers.
Okay. You made me want to change my pick with that one because you did kind of sway me a little because that makes a lot of sense. But I'll stick with what I was going to go with. I was going to say Myles Garrett. Just solely looking at the stats, I think he's been the best defensive rusher in the NFL this season. Already tied three-way tie for most sacks in the season. And then just looking at everything else across the board, I don't know. I think I'd personally give it to him based on stats, although I will say I have not had an obscene amount of time to watch a lot of the games, especially Browns games. Sorry, Browns fans. But so I think I'd go that direction. I do see what you're saying with the TJ
I think
Watt.
Myles Garrett is just less consistent because, like, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about, I watched that entire Browns Seahawks game and he got locked up by Charles Cross and like Jake Curran. And I look at that kind of thing and I'm like, yes, he has games where he does stuff like TJ Watt, like that Colts game. I believe he had he forced a fumble in the Colts end zone. That was a 1 point game and it turned the game for the Browns. That's the kind of stuff that TJ Watt does, and Myles Garrett absolutely can do that too. It's just not happening as consistently, and I think he also has more support in that Cleveland defense than TJ Watt has in the Pittsburgh defense, although it is close. I think he just has, from a game-to-game basis, TJ Watt makes more of those game-breaking plays. I do think it's close between TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett would be my two, but like just looking through some of the plays, like another good example of TJ Watt changing the game against the Rams. He's not just sacking quarterbacks or forcing fumbles to change games. He's also intercepting Matthew Stafford in the red zone, which completely changed that game. It's stuff like that where he's just a complete all-around player, and him intercepting passes is not that rare for him, even though he is a defensive end. He makes more of those impact plays to me than Myles Garrett, and I think while it is very close, I'm going to give it to TJ Watt because I think he's had a little bit more impact on the Steelers season overall than Myles Garrett has on the Browns season.
And the worst part is I don't even know that I disagree with you, so I'm not even going to try and debate that with you. I'm going to stick with the pick that I'm going. That was my gut when I was looking at
I think it's
everything.
Close.
I agree with you. I do think it's close, but if you're looking at going back to what I said before when looking at these types of awards and looking at team impact, because I think that's such a huge thing, like I said, I agree with you. I think TJ Watt definitely deserves it, so I won't be a hypocrite. I think I'll give you that one, TJ Watt. Okay. So, do you want to move on? Offensive Player of the Year.
Offensive Player of the Year?
This one is a bit of a fun one in my opinion, looking at it, but I'm curious who you think deserves it.
So I'm looking at, this is Offensive Player of the Year is a kind of stupid award because it's basically like which non-quarterback is the best.
Yeah.
And it's funny to even see some like quarterbacks in here because it's like if a quarterback wins this award, it's just going to be the guy who won MVP, which is dumb. It's offensive other than quarterbacks, which is a kind of a stupid system. I think Miles Garrett kind of talked about that, how it's dumb that quarterbacks are the only ones who wins MVP. And I think the offensive player of the year conversation is kind of a focal point of that. But I digress. I think I try to not let my personal bias affect me, but like I'm human. I have to. Is Christian McCaffrey probably going to win this award? Yes. Do I feel dirty doing that? Absolutely. So I'm going to give it to instead to a guy who I think has had just as much, if not more, of an impact on their team's fortunes, and that is Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
And I say this for a couple reasons. I think the first reason that I say this is not even what he's doing with the Dolphins. It's seeing what the Chiefs look like without him. Now, the Dolphins did just beat the Chiefs in Germany, partially because Tyreek Hill fumbled. But looking at it as a broader scale, the Chiefs have, even though they are still the Chiefs and are still playing really well, they're winning because of their defense now. They're not winning because of their offense, and their offense looks completely flat. Mahomes no longer has these big plays. He's throwing short to guys like Rashee Rice and Kadarius Toney. Their offense does not look the same when Travis Kelce is the only guy. They won a Super Bowl without Tyreek. Obviously, they can still make it work because Mahomes is Mahomes, but it just looks different without a difference maker like Tyreek Hill. That Chiefs offense only accounted for 14 points against the Dolphins because the one was a fumble return for a touchdown, right? So that's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect of it for Tyreek Hill is the way this Dolphins offense has exploded around him. And I think it's all kind of come into form this year with Mike McDaniel calling the plays, with Tua able to get the ball to him in space. I believe I saw like he was on pace to just like crush a bunch of receiving records. I don't know if he still is because he had a down game against the Chiefs, but he was like, he had already gotten 1,000 yards like 7 weeks through the season, which is something that nobody has ever done before. Absolutely insane for a receiver. And I think the way you put it in a couple of these other conversations is a good way to think about it. If Miami doesn't have Tyreek Hill, where are they?
Yeah.
They are nowhere near where they are right now. They're not putting up 70 points in the Broncos, I'll tell you that. Just because it adds so much of an extra dimension to their game. And when he doesn't play well, like when he kind of has an off game like he did against the Chiefs, like he didn't do that much. Tua threw him a good ball and he dropped it. You can just see how much more one-dimensional this Dolphins offense were. And that Chiefs game was kind of a one-off. The whole other season he has been completely deserving of these accolades, and you can just see what it's opened up for the Dolphins offense, and there's a reason they're being taken seriously as a Super Bowl contender this year as opposed to the years before. It's because he's finally integrated into that offense well. Mike McDaniel's calling plays, and he's having a historic season. So I think CMC is like probably equally as important to the Niners, and you can kind of see that with how they've struggled since he's been out. I do think Tyreek Hill has a bigger impact on the Dolphins than CMC has in the Niners.
Well, I agree with you. I just don't think the one thing I disagree with you on is I don't think it's that close between Tyreek and CMC. I see what you're saying. I still think that Tyreek is, if he doesn't win it this season, if he continues at the pace he's going, it will be a travesty and an incredible robbery. I think that he's having a ridiculous season. And you were talking about some stupid stats, just to name a few. Currently, 9 games into the season, he already has more yards, touchdowns, and targets than T. Higgins had all of last season. And T. Higgins is not a bad wide receiver.
He's a very good wide receiver.
He's a very good wide receiver, exactly. So, or not targets, sorry. Targets is the one thing. This was phrased weird. Another quick stat, Hill is currently averaging 4.1 yards per route run through the first 9 seasons, which nobody has done since they started tracking it.
Oof.
And the number 2 guy was Tyreek Hill last season. Which is kind of hilarious. I don't think it's close. That's basically what I'm trying to say. I think Tyreek Hill is having a ridiculous receiving year. If he continues at the rate he's going, records be damned, Tyreek Hill is about to walk over everything. I think that this season he's having has just been absolutely ridiculous. And you pointed out again, like the impact. What would the Dolphins look like without Tyreek Hill? It would be bad. it would be. I'm not saying they'd be a bad team, but they would not be anywhere as good as they are right now. I think that offense revolves around Tyreek Hill in a certain degree, and I have a hard time saying that they would be anywhere near where they are currently without him. So I have no issue saying that I think it's Tyreek Hill, and I don't think it's close.
I do think it's close. I do think CMC opens up that Niners offense, especially when you have a quarterback like Brock Purdy with the variety he has in the running and passing game. But I do agree that I think Tyreek has bigger impact.
Yeah,
I think it will. I think it depends. I think this is a race that will depend on how the fortunes of these two teams kind of play out. If the Niners continue to lose like they have been, then Tyreek's probably going to start to run away with it a little bit more. But if the Dolphins if the Dolphins kind of slip up, I could see it kind of going the other way. I think it's relatively close as of now, but I do think Tyreek has
yeah,
a decent lead on him today.
and
I
NFL
was gonna
Total
ask.
Access. If you want to
Yes,
talk
that's
about
what I
theirs,
was gonna ask.
there's a CMC, and I don't agree with that. Like I just said.
Okay, I don't. I'm not mad about that. Um, like it's not like an offensive opinion to have.
The
I can see it.
the thing is, in any other season, I'd agree with you, but I just think Tyreek Hill's having such a bonkers season that
Yeah,
it's hard to even think about like just giving it to anyone else with how strong he started. Obviously, he could start slipping up more, and he could just, and the second half of the season, CMC could take it. Like, I'm not saying that I necessarily think Tyreek Hill, like, this is a guarantee Tyreek Hill will win it or deserve it at the end of the year. I'm just saying through the first 9, I don't think it's close.
yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair.
We can move on to
Who do they
MVP
have
though.
for defensive player of the year? Out of
Garrett,
curiosity.
I think.
Okay, okay.
I believe it was Garrett, which I agreed with. But I also agree with a lot of things you said about Watt. So I think that one's a tough one. But
That's close.
yeah,
I think both of these are close. Those are the two closest races, other than MVP, which we're gonna get into.
yeah. So their candidate, who they chose for MVP, is really interesting, and I can't wait to hear about your opinion on
Okay.
that. But if you want, we can start with yours.
Okay. I think this MVP race is just terrible right now, and I don't think there's
Yeah,
anybody that deserves it. I think if they could not award it to some, because it's all quarter. I mean, MVP is basically just the best quarterback award, and I think each of these quarterbacks you can go down the list and list a reason why they shouldn't win it. I don't think it should be Mahomes. I think everybody is going to list Mahomes. I don't think it should be, just because like in comparison to everything else, like their offense is not the reason they're winning games. I don't
yeah,
even like Mahomes is obviously the most valuable player to the Chiefs, and he's going to be that until he retires. Um, but the offense is not the most valuable side of the ball to the Chiefs. They're winning games because of their defense. So in a game where in a season where the Chiefs defense is playing at this kind of level, and that's the reason they're winning games, I can't justify giving it to Mahomes in any context, because that just kind of feels reflexive to where it's like, oh, it's an MVP award, throw Mahomes in there because he's the best player in the league. I don't think that's what this award should be. It's about who's most valuable to their team right now. So I don't think it's going to be Mahomes. I another there's you can go down the list. I'll pull up like MVP odds. I think Mahomes is number one.
which is interesting to me
Yeah,
because I actually disagree with that as well. I don't think that Mahomes deserves it, and I don't really get the
no,
hype behind him getting it. I just
no.
somehow put down all my tabs. That was really weird. Why I had
um,
stuff. Google, you're screwing me. What
no,
is going
no.
on? Okay, well anyway, I was gonna say I don't agree
Yeah,
with Patrick Mahomes. I think
yeah.
that especially when you think about the last little bit, especially early in the season where people were like I feel like around week 6 we all started going like Mahomes is having a strangely bad season.
It's
Like
not even a bad. He's not even doing bad. It's just
it's
that
just not
it's not the
Mahomes
most
like.
important part. It's not because of him. It's not like he's playing badly. It's because the offense is not
Yeah.
clicking in the way that it should.
Yeah,
But
but I just mean that like
even though it's
people
mostly not even
people
though it's
started
mostly not
looking
his
at
fault,
him.
he doesn't deserve MVP.
Yeah, and that's kind of exactly where I was going with that, where it's just like people were actually looking at his stats and going like, it's not bad, but it's not Mahomes. Like Mahomes is elite of the elite. That's not what this is. When I look at this, I just don't see that. And I think people are
Yeah,
finally starting to realize that.
yeah.
Open.
So
It's open.
Mahomes, I don't think is even though I think a lot of outlets are going to pick him, I don't think he's the choice. I think you can run through a couple other quarterbacks that all are equally kind of deserving as Mahomes, but I don't think there's always reasons why they shouldn't be. Um, like Tua, I think is someone who was a real candidate, but I think the issues that the Dolphins have been having against teams with winning records kind of devalues that performance a little bit. And also, when you have a guy like Tyreek Hill, it makes you think how important is Tua actually to that offense, and is he the most valuable
Yeah.
player on that side of the ball? I don't think he is, even though I think he's having an amazing season and is genuinely a top five quarterback. Jalen Hurts, I think there's a case that can be made for him, but I also think this Eagles offense has not been performing the way that it should. Like the Eagles are not playing their best football, even though which is kind of scary considering they're 8-1.
Yeah.
But they've kind of been sneaking by in some of these games, and he hasn't been playing up to what we saw from him last year. Last year, Jalen Hurts was better than this year, Jalen Hurts. Um, then I'll go into those three guys are all high in the MVP rankings. I don't think they're going to get it because of those reasons. I think here I have a top like two, and I kind of convinced myself into my second guy like just now. Joe Burrow. I think
Okay.
this depends on how. I'm not saying he's going to win it. I have a guy right now. If the voting were to happen right now, I have a guy who'd be ahead of him. But I think if Joe Burrow plays at the level he has the last 2 weeks for the rest of the season, I think it makes a case for him as MVP that will be impossible to beat. Because you see how listless this Bengals team was when he was hurt, and then now that he's healthy, how explosive they look, and how they're beating up on good teams like the Niners and Bills. The Niners and Bills games weren't close because Joe Burrow is just lighting these guys up. The Bills game again, like it was a one-score game technically in the end, but it was a two-score game for most of it, and it was not as close as it seemed. The Niners game was a two-score game. Joe Burrow is lighting up people right now, and while I don't think he deserves it as of now because he wasn't performing early on in the season, if he continues this level of play, it will just go to show how valuable he is because the Bengals sucked when he was hurt, and now
Yeah.
they are performing like a juggernaut again. I do think there's someone who's more valuable right now, and it's kind of going under the radar. Maybe this is a little bit of recency bias with what I just saw happen to my beloved Seahawks, but I do
Yeah.
think this could be a year for Lamar Jackson to win the MVP. And I don't know if he's playing. The case against Lamar Jackson is that a lot of it is the like he doesn't have the same kind of gaudy individual performances that a bunch of these guys have been having. But I think what a guy like Lamar does to your defense, and I was just watching this against Seattle, the specific skill set that he has and how well he's able to execute it. He's not doing anything flashy, but just what I saw with his Ravens offense against Seattle, he just creates an impossible challenge for the Seattle defense to where like if anybody else were to come in, like even like because we played against Joe Burrow when he was relatively healthy. I did not have the same fear that I had against Lamar Jackson because he is such an enigma and creates such pressure on a defense. Like Tony Romo said it in the broadcast really well. You cannot cover all that this Ravens team does. You cannot cover. You have to commit to something, and you're gonna leave a spot open because if you go to stop the run, like from the running backs, Lamar is going to either pass it or go outside, rush by himself. If you commit to Lamar on the run, he is going to dot you up throwing down the field because he can do that. Like if you commit to trying to stop the passing game, he's just going to roll out of there, dodge your guys in the pocket, and scamper for another 20 yards. It happens so
Yeah.
many times against the Seahawks where it's like 3rd and 15. The Seahawks played fair, like and the score doesn't show it, but the Seahawks played fairly well in that first half, at least on defense. They forced the Ravens to punt the first couple drives. They got them into 3rd and long, but it's just what happens when the play breaks down and Lamar is able to just like run so effortlessly for a first down. It's like he doesn't even care about how many yards there are. That kind of thing, especially with how good the rest of this Ravens team is and how well I think they're going to do the rest of the season, where I think they're probably going to be the AFC's #1 seed. I think it's going to come between them and the Bengals. Just looking at that, I think that will be what it comes down to because MVP is a team award more than we'd like to admit it is. I think if the Ravens win the #1 seed, I think Lamar's going to get it. If the Bengals win it, I think Burrow's probably going to get it. But as of right now, with what I just saw and the pressure that Lamar Jackson puts on a defense, I'm gonna go with Lamar Jackson, and I don't think he's getting enough MVP talk with how he's playing right now.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I do agree with you. I actually did have Lamar. But I think it does kind of show what you said right at the very beginning, in the fact that this is a very crappy MVP race. Just in the
Yeah.
fact that you're totally right. I don't feel like anybody necessarily deserves it. Because I was even, like, I was thinking Lamar beforehand. Because he's been a big part of why the Ravens have been fairly good this year. And most of the quarterbacks have had different stretches where they haven't been very good. I thought the Joe Burrow's pick is very interesting because of how bad he started at the beginning of the year. And whether that was because he was hurt or not. His stats were not great.
It
And
it was very clearly because he was hurt. You can like see a difference
you
in
can't,
just
but
how he's moving.
regardless, I'm just saying that you can't just throw that away because he was hurt. You still have to take those
I,
games
I
into
think
account. And I think
I think you almost like you can use that though because it's like if like if you're voting on it and you've watched all the games that Joe Burrow has played, you can see how different this offense is when Joe Burrow has his mobility versus when he doesn't. Which is why I think if he's consistent for the rest of the year, he
fair.
can win it because then it's almost a case for you to say, look at
Sure.
how
Okay.
garbage this team was when I wasn't at my peak.
That's fair. Okay, I do understand that. That's a very good point. I still think that I would give it to Lamar, but just to add on, I was looking at it because I was curious. Obviously, Lamar still he has an MVP winning season, and I was
Yeah.
curious if you take a look at that season halfway through compared to what he's looked like this season, another season where it looks like he could win MVP, and it looks nowhere close. It's actually kind of sad. And
Oh yeah.
that really goes to attest how good of a season Lamar had in 2019. But, and that's not me trying to put him down now. I think that just shows how bad of a pool we have this season. Because
I agree.
I still think I'd give it to Lamar based on everything because he is having a pretty remarkable season. Like, all things considered, it's still very impressive. He's looking like he's going to hit 4,000 yards on the season passing yards, sorry, for what's going to be the first time in his career, which is cool. But I think, I don't know. And that's assuming that
It
there's nothing that jumps in the way to stop him because he's had some injury concerns in the last couple seasons. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But that'd be my only
yeah.
reason for necessarily not betting on it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's like that doesn't shock me that his numbers are nowhere near that MVP season because again, like you said, this MVP race there's not a clear candidate, and I'm saying Lamar gets it. Um, I think he's having a good season, but there's a case against him, and the case against
Yeah.
him is that he's not making the flashy plays that you normally see in an MVP type season. He's not jumping off the page. I think he is the most important player to that Ravens team, which is why I think by definition he is MVP right now. But that's also why I think if Joe Burrow continues to play the way he does, that's the kind of flashy play that wins you an MVP. And if he keeps that consistent, I think he overtakes Lamar. Even though Lamar is playing great and is very consistent, um, Joe Burrow will at that point be more important to the Bengals team than Lamar is to him. And I think that
Yeah.
can put him over the edge. But as of right now, I think in a relatively weak MVP field where you can make a case against everybody, the pressure that Lamar puts on defenses is the most valuable trait that any of these quarterbacks have.
Yeah. No, I do agree with you. I think, like, the more I look in depth into Lamar's stats, the more I like what he's doing. I think that while he's been less of a volume runner in this season compared to that 2019 season, what he's done, he's been a lot more efficient compared to that season. Like, for example, he's going to easily beat. He's already in that season. He only had 7 touchdowns. This season, he's already at 5. First downs, he's looking to blow that out of the water as well. It looks like he's just a lot smarter with the way he runs, which I think just comes with
Yeah.
experience. And I think that's maybe what we're seeing this season. We're seeing a more developed and experienced Lamar Jackson, and
Mhm.
I think if we keep seeing this from him, I think this could be someone. A lot of conversation after that 2019 season was great, do it again, because at that point we hadn't seen a quarterback who relied so heavily on their rushing ability actually survive in the NFL long term. Because sure, Mike Vick was great, but he had injury issues on his own, and then he just didn't stick around long reason. I don't know, didn't have that dog in him, or whatever you want to say. But whatever you want to say, there's a lot of things you can attest to Mike Vick. But I think we're actually starting to see Lamar Jackson. Obviously, this had to come if he was going to continue with his NFL career without kamikazing. But I think this is a good sign, especially if you're a Ravens fan, that you've got a quarterback who plans on sticking around for another 10 years. And I think if he continues to play at this level, he's got a lot of MVPs going in the next couple seasons. I think I have been a Lamar hater, I will say, because I have been that person who's been like, okay, do it again. Because in the last couple seasons, it felt like we haven't been seeing the same Lamar Jackson. I think despite his stats, sure, they're lower, but they are a lot better. I think that if he continues at this rate, then I have no issue with giving him MVP. Even if maybe it's not flashy, maybe some of the numbers aren't as big as you would be used to, it's still very impressive what he's currently doing.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you put that really well. I think it's the kind of approach that will have a lot more success in the future. And it's not like he has any less skill than that 2019 MVP season. He's just more selective on how to use it, and that almost makes it more effective, which I think is great. That Ravens team is scary, and I'm so glad we don't have to play them again. I'm so glad. Oh,
yeah,
God.
No. I mean, I can say the same. Despite not even watching that game, everything, because I just didn't have time, everything I heard about it was just like, God.
This burned into my retinas.
The first thing I said after hearing the score was, oh, thank God I missed that one.
Yeah.
Like, I mean...
You would have had a more fun time doing literally anything else. I did. Sad. Yeah. I sat there from kickoff till the final score graphic showed up on CBS because I am a lunatic. But if the Seahawks if the Seahawks play like that, I mean, like it was mostly because the Ravens are a really good team. But if the Seahawks play like that next week, I'm gonna be at that game. I was telling my girlfriend I'm just jumping off the third deck of Lumen Field. Like I can't do that 2 weeks in a row.
Fair enough. Who are they playing?
Do you see it? Washington. So extra if they don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say
if they play like that, then you're gonna see me.
Sam Howell will be the death of Caleb Peterson. Put that on a tombstone.
Oh God. Oh God. If you see a blood splatter on Lumen Field, there will be no Trick Play podcast anymore. It will be canceled.
I'll be doing it. No, I'll just put a computer in front of your gravestone. It'll be the shittiest podcast ever. Simon talks to a wall for 2 hours.
I'd watch that.
Yeah. That actually would be what they force you to watch in purgatory. Like that would be it. Just like
it's like I would still be doing the podcast, but I can't say anything bad. I'm just like screaming.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd just be talking shit about the Seahawks the entire time as well. It'd be great. Okay, well, we can move on. NHL is next up.